The yeas are 86, the nays are 11, and the bill is passed.
Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is here tonight, sitting with the First Lady. Let each of us, if you're able to stand and send an unmistakable signal to the world of Ukraine. Thank you.
We cannot afford to lose focus in one place or another. That's why, in order to be able to stop not only Russia but other terroristic regimes, we also have to win in Ukraine.
Good morning and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm David Ignatius, a columnist for the Post. We're honored to be joined today by Ukraine's ambassador to Washington, Oksana Markarova. She'll give us an assessment of this terrible war, nearly 700 days into the conflict. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining Washington Post Live again. It's good to see you.
Thank you, David. I'm honored to be here. It's always a great conversation for me, and hopefully will be great conversation for our audience, so we can share a little bit about why almost 2 years into the full-fledged phase of the war, it's still important for all of us to win.
So, Ambassador, let's begin with the situation in Congress, where the assistance needed to help Ukraine continue in this war is still under debate. Senator Chris Coons, who's been a strong supporter of Ukraine, told NBC this week that if the U.S. Congress doesn't pass aid for Ukraine, they can't hang on for months without it. In other words, in his view, this could be a matter of weeks. So let's begin by talking worst case. If Congress fails to act and approve this aid, how long has Ukraine got that it can continue in this fight?
Well, David, that's a very difficult question to answer, but I think it's the right question to ask as we're waiting for this support from the U.S. and from all of our friends and allies right now, because we now have to stay the course. And despite the fact that Ukraine has achieved so much during the past 2 years, that we have been able to prove Putin and Russia wrong, we have been liberated, we have liberated more than 50% of what they have taken. We are defending Ukraine everywhere on the front line and in everywhere in Ukraine. And today is one of these days when, again, a huge barrage of missiles and drones was shelled on peaceful cities, including Kyiv. But, we will stand as long as we will be able to fight. And Ukrainians will fight, regardless of the fact whether we will have weapons or we will not have weapons. But of course, in order to win, we need all the weapons. And every time I'm asked this question, how long can you stand without support? Obviously, it's going to be very difficult. And even though we have started producing our own weapons, we have started co-producing, we still rely heavily on support from our friends and allies, especially from the U.S. And I do have hope, talking to so many people from both parties, that there will be help. Now, the time is of the essence.
Ambassador, let's just focus on the situation on Capitol Hill right now. I'm sure you've got the best contacts in town and are watching this debate. It's a matter of life and death for your country. What do you hear? Do you think that it's likely, first, that the bipartisan package that would include Ukraine aid and border assistance will be enacted by the Senate, and that it'll have enough support in the House to get through? What do you think?
Well, the bipartisan support for Ukraine is there, both on the House and Senate side. And but during the past almost two months, the discussion was not about Ukraine. So if when in November, October, I have been answering a lot of questions, providing a lot of information about different parts of Ukrainian support. When President Zelensky was here in December, he also shared with both senators and people on the in the House what is the plan, what are the priorities for 2024, how well we're doing the accountability, transparency, and reporting on everything we're receiving. During all January, we hear the mostly debates about something that is not related to Ukraine, but is in the package, which is American internal issue on immigration and border control. And again, I cannot comment on it, but I can only hope that the solution there will be found as soon as possible so we can move ahead with the whole package, because I know both Ukraine and Israel and other friends are counting on it. It looks like there is progress in the discussions, and we hear it from both sides. But again, in a democracy, discussions could be lengthy, and progress is great, but we need results. So talking to all the friends and allies, again, explaining why it is so critical for Ukraine, but not only for Ukraine. It's critical for all of us to stop decisively Putin and show that democracies, even though we need all these discussions, we still can be united and decisive, like Russia, Iran, North Korea are very united and decided in their malign plans. So we have to, of course, discuss, of course, engage all the stakeholders, of course, explain it to people, of course, address all the concerns that the critics and skeptics have. But we also have to be able to do it fast enough not to lose. And this is what is at stake now.
We have a question, Madam Ambassador, from a member of the audience, Maureen in Colorado, who asks a very practical political question. What can President Biden do in these remaining days of this crucial debate to make the case to voters and to members of Congress that this is crucial for the United States interest? What thoughts do you have about how that basic point that Americans have a lot at stake in this can become clearer?
Well, let me, instead of giving advice to President Biden, because I think he has made this case when he submitted the package and when administration, especially Secretary Austin, Secretary Yellen, Secretary Raimondo, Secretary Blinken, everyone went to Congress and gave their position on why it is important. But let me also share why I think it's important for all of us. Now, Putin has been very clear what he's fighting against. It's not only Ukraine, which he dreams of destroying and occupying again, but it's against everyone who believes in the same values. He threatens other NATO members. He threatens other democratic countries. He says that he's fighting for his way of living, so to say. And it's important for all of us to show that we can support our way of living. Now, 2 years into the full-fledged phase of this war, and soon it's going to be 10 years after Putin attacked us for the first time, never Ukraine asked our friends and allies to send soldiers to fight for us. We still can do it ourselves. We can fight an enemy that threatens all of us, threatens Black Sea security, threatens Euro-Atlantic security, threatens all countries that value freedom and democracy. We can do it with our own soldiers, and our people are ready to do that. All we are asking is to send us the tools, help us with support, defense, budget, and others, so we can decisively win and go back to the prosperity and peace, which all of our countries need in order to deliver better to our people. So in a strange way, providing more military support, more support to us now, will result in less support and more money then be available to every country for their own citizens. But in order to prevent American soldiers, European soldiers from fighting Putin, which will happen, unfortunately, if, God forbid, Ukraine falls, we have to support Ukraine and stop it while it's still in Ukraine.
I'm reminded of what Winston Churchill told Franklin Roosevelt in 1939, give us the tools and we will finish the job. So
They can finish the job.
I want to ask you, Ambassador, to help our viewers understand what it feels like to be in Ukraine today. You mentioned that today was an especially difficult day because of a barrage of missiles. I have an app on my phone that lights up every time there's an air alert over Kyiv from my visits there during the war. It lights up 2 or 3 times a day. Give us a sense of what it's like for people in this cold winter, cold January, and wave after wave of rockets and drones strikes the capital. What's that like for the people of Ukraine?
Well, David, I have the same app and it's very difficult, like today, one of those days when not only dozens of missiles and drones and everything that Russia can gather together was sent to Kyiv, Kharkiv, Kherson, also Pavlograd. They attacked residential areas and they have destroyed just high-rise buildings or the private houses of the people. We have more than 60 people injured as the result of this horrible night. We already have 7 that confirmed dead. It's horrible, just imagine ordinary people. This is one of the days when, unfortunately, I have to call my mom and be worried if she's not responding because, and you don't know whether it's because something happened or because she's in the basement. Everyone have to wake up their kids during the night and go to the shelter or go. It's just unbelievable, a bit surreal. I have to share that in 21st century, in the middle of Europe, we have attacks after attacks after attacks from absolutely aggressive war criminals in Kremlin who are just sending missiles into residential areas and just killing people for no reason other than some sick person imperialistic fantasies, and of course, because of the air defense, thanks to the US and all of our friends and partners, we are destroying the majority of these missiles, but not all of them. And frankly, this is why support is so important now, because we will be running out of the interceptors, of the missiles that we need to protect life, not to mention all the weapons that we need in order to liberate still our territories. Because while people are suffering in Kyiv, in Lviv, in other places from these rocket attacks on a regular basis, there are also millions of Ukrainians who suffer under occupation. And that we don't see it on TV, we don't hear sometimes about it, but it's millions of people who are being killed, raped, tortured, literally as we speak. So it's a genocide which has been committed for 2 years now, and we have to stop it. And we have to stop it for the sake of Ukrainians, of course. We have to save our lives together because this is who we are as humans. But we also have to stop it to prevent other genocides like this, because it's not just Putin. Other dictators are watching, other terroristic regimes are watching. And as I said, it's the North Korean missiles that are flowing into Ukraine right now. It's Iranian drones that are used against our civilians.
So thank you for making that personal. Imagine members of our audience what it would be like to have to call your mom and make sure she's alive today in the middle, as you say, in the middle of Europe. So, Ambassador, I want to ask you about ways to deal with the terrible attacks that Ukraine is facing, and I want to start with something that's not military but financial. $300 billion in Russian central bank assets have been frozen. And there's an argument that that money, which is Russia's, should be taken and given to Ukraine to finance the rebuilding of Ukrainian territory that's been destroyed. I want to make the argument for doing that, and then please, in doing so, respond to the worries that people have that would have a very destructive effect on the integrity, reliability of central banks and the international financial system. So tell us why to do it and why concerns about it are misplaced.
Thank you, David. It's a very important question, which Ukraine started raising from the day one of this horrible invasion. First, because Russia invaded us in 2014, and they have destroyed so much already in 2014, 2015. Second, when they restarted this full-fledged war, during the first full year of war, the total destruction, as assessed by the World Bank, was equal to 411 billion US dollars. And it's just scratch of the surface. It's just the physical destruction of the buildings. So, of course, we need to repair everything now, and of course, we need to reconstruct in the future. And it's just fair that aggressor has to pay for it. So it's Russian money that belongs to the Russian state. It's the sovereign money of the country. They have been frozen in a number of jurisdictions, and we're working very hard, and Ukraine is advocating for this money not only to be frozen, but to be confiscated and provided to Ukraine. Now, a number of countries, including U.S., already are doing that with a private money. So as you know, the changes into the legislation have been made in the U.S., and since the beginning of 2023, DOJ is doing an excellent job going after the sanctioned individuals, their frozen assets, and through the court decisions here, confiscating them, and through the Department of State providing it to Ukraine. And the first amount, maybe not huge, but it's very important that it already happened, that belonged to Russian oligarch Malafeyev already was confiscated and provided to the veterans projects in Ukraine. Now, the same should and could be done with the sovereign funds. And as the former Minister of Finance, of course, we all used to say that the sovereign assets have the immunity and there is no way you can touch it. On the other hand, this is such an extraordinary circumstances where an aggressor deliberately attacked a sovereign country. Russia is destroying everything in Ukraine, not to mention killing the people. There is solid proof of not only their actions, but also the results of their action, destruction, the dam destruction, the flooding, everything that they have done in Ukraine. It's not only the war crimes, it's also something they have to compensate for. Now, you can wait until the end of the war and the end and going through the court system, or we can go ahead and work on confiscating these funds now. And I'm sure it will not have any effect on the broader system, and it will not scare the normal countries, and it will not seed their distrust in any jurisdictions that are holding this money, unless, of course, these are people who intend to attack their neighbors unjustifiably and without any provocation. So this war has already, and Russians' actions have already shattered the global system which was built after the World War II. And we have to also be, I wouldn't say flexible, but very proactive in addressing these new challenges. And this is one of the areas where I think we have to move decisively. And Ukraine's position has been on these Russian assets from the day one. And we're very glad that this year we see not only the willingness, but very active discussions among G7 ministers on not whether to do it, but how to do it in the proper and legally sound way. So it's very important to do so. And I just want to also say that it's not actually a plan B, like I saw some discussions where people are saying, instead of the support to Ukraine, these assets could be used. It's a part of the plan A. We do need all the support that our friends can provide to us now in order to be able to sustain the effort, but we need to actively work on this confiscation so that we will have this money to compensate to people, to rebuild, and it will take some time. But in order to make it faster, we have to work on it already now.
Thank you, Ambassador, for making the case. Some prominent economists, including former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, have argued that this step is appropriate and urgently necessary. So, Ambassador, I want to ask you about the military situation. We've seen Ukraine, even with all its difficulties, trying to take this war home to Russia, to make an impact on Russia and Russian-occupied territory in new ways. Over the weekend, there was heavy shelling of the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk in the east of your country. At least 25 people were killed, reportedly, in that shelling. Russia issued a statement calling this a brutal terrorist attack. Given Russian attacks on your own cities and civilians, that didn't ring true to me, but I want to ask you for your response. And should we expect more attacks like the Donetsk attack in coming weeks and months?
Well, on Donetsk, that question should be asked from Russians because there was a Russian provocation. Yes, Ukraine has the right to defend itself by striking into military targets, and that's what we are doing, and we will do, of course, more of it, including where the Russia is using, this ammo dumps and everything else. But as our military swiftly said after Russian provocation in Donetsk, that we didn't shell, and those people were killed by the Russian shelling. And they specifically created provocation before the Ramstein meeting today, before the UN meeting. And this is frankly coming from their playbook, how to kill innocent civilians and attack innocent civilians rather than even when they're fighting a very unfair, unjustified, unprovoked war. But even war, they cannot fight within the rules of the engagement of the war. They simply fight with the civilians. So, this is one of the war crimes which Ukraine will be investigating as well. It's done on our territory by the Russian forces. And, Ukraine is developing drones. And this is one of the area where we have been successful. And the range of these drones is getting bigger and bigger so that we can have a reach and again destroy this ammunition depots and military targets everywhere on our territory and beyond. But Ukraine has never targeted civilian population. And even when we are liberating our cities, you can see it during these 2 years, when we liberated Kherson, when we liberated other towns and cities, our armed forces are making it in a very responsible way, even though it actually more difficult for them and cost them sometimes more of their military personnel lives, but trying to liberate cities so that we can protect our civilian population that is there. So this is the situation with that.
Thank you for clarifying that. There was another striking development over the last week, and that was 2 attacks on Russian energy loading facilities near St. Petersburg, far from Ukraine, strategically very important. The Kyiv Post quoted unnamed Ukrainian security service sources as talking about how this move hampers the occupiers' ability to sustain their forces by striking at energy, the source of Russian revenue. Could you comment on that attack, if you can, but more generally on Ukraine's readiness to strike targets in Russia to make this war more costly to Putin?
David, I can only comment on what is confirmed by the Ukrainian military, of course, but more broadly, again, just to say the UN Charter allows us to defend ourselves by including strikes into Russia's territory on the military targets which are used against us. So as more capabilities are developed by Ukrainians, we do have now drones that can reach hundreds of kilometers. We will do everything possible in order to defend ourselves. Now, it's very easy for Russia to stop all of it because this is their war of choice. They can end it very quickly. They can just decide to stop the aggression, withdraw from our territory, and that will be the end of the war. But until then, when they are targeting us, when they are killing us, when they are massing all the troops and fighting and trying to occupy more and killing our people and torturing our people and stealing our children and doing all the war crimes against us, we are left with no choice but to defend ourselves. But even doing so, again, we're doing everything according with all the international rules, contrary to what Russians are doing.
So, Ambassador, in the few minutes that we have left, I want to ask you to step back and look at the state of this war as we near the 2-year anniversary. Your commanding general, Zaluzhny, said in a remarkable interview with The Economist in October that this war has, in his words, reached a level of stalemate, and he warned that it could drag on for years and wear down the Ukrainian state. So I want to ask you, as Ukraine's ambassador to Washington, is that accurate? Is this war now in a stalemate, and is there a danger of a war of attrition that will just become bloodier and bloodier?
I think, both, all of us, from President Zelensky to our chairman Zaluzhny, to every soldier on the front line and every Ukrainian everywhere, we know that, first of all, we witness this war on a daily basis. And this is a very hot war. Whether you look at the front line, which is a very long, active front line, even during the winter, or everywhere in Ukraine, like today, where the missiles are flying into your city and destroying lives and disrupting lives for so many people. Now, in order to not to allow it to be a stalemate, in order not to get into the situation which, unfortunately, Ukraine was forced to get into in 2015, the recipe is very simple on the one hand. It's weapons and support to Ukraine, more of it, and sanctions and isolation to Russia. And if we move, not only stay the course, but move actively, double down in both of these directions, we can liberate our country. We have shown how we liberated 50% in 2022. We have shown how we liberated literally the Black Sea in 2023 and created a grain corridor of our own without even negotiating through the UN with Russia. We are seeing how we are ramping up our production. We have started co-production with the US, with Great Britain and others. We just have to do a little bit more and stay the course and not to allow Putin for all of us to get tired or get dissuaded or think that it's too hard. And actually, it's a very winnable war, and it's winnable soon. We have a saying, and you probably have the same, that it's the darkest right before the dawn. So it's difficult. It's cold. People are losing a lot. But every time I call home to ask how are they're usually asking whether I'm okay. They're very upbeat, and they all say, "Don't worry, we can handle it. We'll stay the course. We have to win. Just make sure we have more weapons and support."
So that's a tough and inspiring, Ambassador. I take it from what you said that the talk that you hear in Washington, even from people who are great friends of Ukraine, that maybe Ukraine should think about a kind of South Korea solution where it has strong defensible lines and can protect the territory it holds, and that territory can become part of Europe and NATO. I take it that you're not ready for that kind of solution. You would argue that it's not don't think about South Korea, think about liberating all of it.
I don't think I will tell you a secret, but most importantly, the aggressor is not ready for that kind of solution. There is no such option on the table, even to start with. The intent of Putin and Russia did not change. They want to occupy all Ukraine or destroy all Ukraine. And until we deny them this possibility, they will not be able to even discuss anything. The only plausible peace plan is President Zelensky's peace formula. And it's based on the UN decisions that already have been supported in some instances by more than 154 countries. So if we want to get to peace, to just and lasting peace, we just have to double down on the battlefield and sanctions. And hopefully that, together with active work on the peace formula, which, as you know, in Davos was attended by more than 80 countries now, will all converge in one place where we could pair the battles wins with sanctions that will finally stop the production in Russia, stop their income that they're turning into the missiles, with the diplomatic efforts and solutions, and we can get to peace. And nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. But it has to be just and lasting peace.
Ambassador, I have a last question before we leave, and it's one that's just a special outrage in this war. Numbers that I've seen suggest that 20,000 Ukrainian children have been separated from their families and taken to Russia, and that of those 20,000, only 380 or so have been reunited with their families. I think every parent can imagine what a nightmare that is. What is Ukraine doing to try to get these children back and together with their families again?
We're doing everything we can, and we're asking everyone to help us. The situation is even worse than that. 20,000 is the registered cases. It's the children we have identified, and we know that Russians have stolen them and trying to put for speedy adoptions, relocating them to far parts of Russia, changing their last name so that they will never be able to return even. But unless we liberate all Ukraine, we will not even know how many. It could be hundreds of thousands, because we don't know the fate of so many, unfortunately, of our Ukrainians, whether they are on the occupied territories, they are killed, they are abducted into Russia. And of course, the largest problem is, the biggest problem is with children. It's even difficult to understand how human beings, even as evil as Russians, can do something like this. How can you take orphans or children or separate children from their parents and then just simply put them into, in other families, or put them into what they call the re-education camps? This is horrible. That's why the first crime for which Putin already is indicted, and there is arrest warrant for him and for his so-called ombudsman, is exactly this: the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. So we have the initiative which is called Bring Kids Back UA. We are gathering all the people, and I'm so glad U.S. is an active participant of that. This is the area where, again, we have to proactively develop policies, because something like this have not done by evil people since literally Nazi were doing this during the World War II. So we have to locate them, we have to identify them, we have to get all of them back. And of course, the chances of doing so are going to be much higher when we win. That's why, the fate of our children is so much related with our ability to defend ourselves and win in this war. Our children, also civilians, and our prisoners of war, which still are held in Russia in horrible conditions, contrary to how we are treating their prisoners.
Ambassador, thank you for a moving conversation about this terrible war as it approaches year two. We want you to come back, hopefully, to talk about better news from Ukraine. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and good day to everyone.
So thanks to everyone for watching this edition of Washington Post Live. To learn more about the upcoming programs that we have, please go to WashingtonPostLive.com. Thank you for joining us today to listen to Ukraine's ambassador talk about this very, very painful conflict.